on. I'm on vacation
can't
here. So here we are. All right, we're live here today, right? We're live. Hey, this is Anthony Parent of IRSMedic. And, Friday we had a fantastic discussion about really the very simple proposal that we have to remove double taxation for Americans abroad. We went over that, and we kind of went over, essentially what happened, though, is hold on, I'm getting a little echo. Are you guys hearing that echo as well?
Nope.
All right, it's just me. All right, well, fantastic. I have to listen to my beautiful voice echoing, which isn't so bad. We had so many questions on Friday, we couldn't get to them all. So we are here to answer all your questions about Solomon's main proposal to eliminate double taxation. So Solomon, welcome. And as we wait for the questions to roll in, hopefully they do, why don't you tell us about some of the issues that, what popped up over the weekend?
Over the weekend, first of all, I was under the weather, so I did not review all the questions, be honest with you. I only take a couple questions. I think there are a couple things I have to deal with. One is everybody does it. Everybody is not in compliance, okay? To me, that is our own morality issue, right? If everybody breaks law, are we going to do the same? Do we still believe in the rule of law, right? Even though it's a bad law, and we work hard to fix it, right? So that is something we need to talk about. And the other thing is people are not happy with me because I would not let people get away with, since they are not in compliance. That means they don't have a dual tax residency in a foreign country and in US. They're not even in US tax system. So that means they don't even pay double taxation. And they want to be benefited from Trump's ending double taxation. So my first question was, are you asking me to do a amnesty bill for you, right? And for somebody clearly is not qualified, and also clearly they choose to stay out of system. Now, for that reason, actually, over the weekend, I reached out to both John and you and find out, what would you charge to bring a person into compliance, tax compliance? And John said $8,000, and you said $10,000.
Well, I'm actually closer to John because I was including a renunciation fee in there too. So
okay.
Right, yeah, no, and I would say if you're not renouncing, then I'm actually closer with John.
Okay. In fairness, okay, I think I'm not sure I remember being asked that specifically, but I mean, we're just talking tax compliance, right? That's what we're talking about. Tax compliance.
Right.
So
and bring people in the system in compliance, so they can benefit from ending double taxation.
I think both those figures are actually high for the average person, right? So we talk about tax compliance. There's two ways of viewing it, right? If the people just want to remain U.S. citizens and then sort of, be the beneficiaries of whatever's going on here, if that's what they want to do, they could, just go back 3 years under like the streamline program. But if they, if they want out of it altogether, then it would be, 6 years. But if it's just an individual, okay, without any separate small businesses and things like that, I think the tax compliance component of this, just the tax compliance, can be done for significantly less than $8,000 or $10,000. I think. Okay, but I think that Anthony would be the better person to talk to about that because he charges for tax compliance work. I delegate tax compliance work.
Yeah, and it would really, and in my mind, I'm thinking the average person is somebody my age, somebody who's 53. Like, okay, what's that going to be? It's like, well, they're going to have some pensions going on. They could have some investments, and that's the thing that's why I'm going with the a little bit higher. For somebody younger, no, you're right, John. I think it could be, if you don't have a lot of assets, overseas. Oh yeah, no, it's not that difficult to get into compliance. We do have our first questions coming in, and I want to get to those.
Okay.
And so this is Melody Hunter. And I would say, okay, Melody Hunter, here's something for you. Here's a joke for you. Would you say the U.S. tax system is the Lucretian mode? Anyway, here's a great question, though. How would one prove their physical residence? In many parts of the world with freedom of movement, such as Schengen, I assume that's China, and area and others, there are no stamps, no immigration records. Is it just going to be a self-certification?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hey, Kim joined us. Hey, all right, you got on earlier, Kim. I didn't have a chance to tell people you'd be joining us a little later, so thank you so much for hopping on. So we got our first question, Kim. Here it is. How will one prove their physical residence in many parts of the world with freedom of movement, such as Schengen and others, area and others? There's no stamps, no immigration records. So how are we going to do this? Do you want to handle this question?
Well, I don't think I have a global answer to this question because this is obviously, as Melody states, an issue by country. But when I lived in the Netherlands, for instance, you have to register with the gemeente. So everybody is tracked. In Europe, even though there may not be certain types of records, you're pretty well tracked. So in Europe, for instance, that would be quite easy. In the rest of the world, I'm not sure. I'm sure that there are ways of doing that. And of course, we are tracked around the world. There are ways of finding us. We do have rental agreements. We do have housing agreements.
Yeah.
We have tax filings in those locations attached to an address. I think that there are ways of doing it. I don't have a global answer for it, but I'm sure that this is actually something that could be done with stuff that's already available.
So first of all,
thank you very much, Kim.
First of all, I'm not convinced that there would be any separate requirement of proof. I think that the proof probably operates more on the level of, if somebody said to you, well, do you really not live in the United States sort of thing, right? But I mean, let's look at how that works under the existing rules. Certainly there are many Americans abroad who file using the foreign earned income exclusion, that lists within reason, certain criteria, not having a tax home, et cetera, et cetera. And I would expect that, in fact, it wouldn't surprise me to even tie it to that, right? The test for the foreign earned income exclusion. But what I would not expect from this is some detailed, questionnaire on this. I don't think.
Solomon, would you? Because I think we talked about just going online and checking a box, and so it's really up to the taxpayer. If you want to lie, okay,
it's your liability,
but
it's your liability if you lie, right? And the penalty.
That's all the way, right?
And the criminal penalty if you start lying, right? And I think the reason is when we're asking for something from government, we need to show our willingness to do extra steps to get there, right? And there is distrust, I can tell you that. And that's how FATCA got through, right? Obama knew lots of people, especially accidental Americans, are not filing anything. And based on current CBT, and they are not in compliance, they are breaking the law, so they got we all got a hit. Not me. Overseas Americans all got a hit. All FATCA, right? And so from that perspective, if we're going to do such as, we don't want FATCA requirement reporting anymore, because if you don't have U.S. source income, you don't have to report and file and pay tax. The chance of your cheating is what? 0, right? And since it's 0, and you should not be required to, a bank should not be required to report you, and then we can go to Treasury and to deal with FBAR based on this new scenario and the new bill passed.
It seems to me, as I think about this.
Oh, and here's Ori has basically the same question though. So same question.
Well, hold on a minute here.
Yep.
Let's try to keep this stuff as pigeonholed as we can. Okay. Going back to Melody's question, would it not be sufficient, or at least presumptively sufficient, just to be able to show a tax return filed in a country as a resident? I mean, let's say you're
That
dealing.
could be that could be many ways, right?
Yeah, but
at the same time, right?
some countries don't have tax returns.
But at the same time, from respect of individual privacy, I would now want to show my tax return in London to IRS, right? And if you allow me to check out the box online, I'm more than happy to do that. But the problem running into is, oh my God, government is going to track us. Hey, you don't know. Government already tracked
sense
us.
of that at all.
Right.
You know, I mean, first of all, the way this is operating, you know, mostly is people who have been filing tax returns, right?
Right.
You know, so they file in the U.S. and all of a sudden they move out of the U.S. You know,
Right.
I don't think that's a concern. I think that that's an administrative issue that
Totally.
is dealt with way down the road. You know, after there's been agreement on the general principles here. I mean, it's not going to be a bar to. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we got that one. Hey, if you're joining us, thank you so much for joining us. We are answering our questions from our Friday session that we didn't have time to do. So joining me is Solomon Yu. Kim just hopped on a couple minutes ago. Thank you so much, Kim. And by the way, the Twitter reviews on you were, hey, there's the star right there. So thank you so much, Kim.
It's great. And that's of course, the communications director.
Right, I know, right? As if we got a real movement here, right? Thank God, fantastic. And then the great John Richardson is joining us. So we just answered our first question, and I think it's a pretty solid question there for sure. And Ori has we'll get to this now. You know, how do we prove the physical residency? And essentially, what I would hope is self-certification, because as soon as we get into filing things, well, we're no longer at something simple. We're now filing things. And
Can I take
filing? Yeah, go ahead, John. Of course.
Yeah, let me take a stab at this. I was reading after our Friday discussion. I was reading some of the Twitter stuff about it, and I went through the comments as well. And I realized, so we were talking about the dual, you know, what they're talking on Twitter, the dual residency requirement, you know, the tax residency and the, you know, the sort of physical residency. And I noticed you've got the words physical residency in this. I do not understand physical residency to mean that you have to be physically present in the place all the time. You know, I understand physical residency to be something that's more akin to, you know, the bona fide residence test under the foreign income exclusion. You know, generally it's, you know, it's your home. It's where, you know, you go back to after you go out in the world and conquer everything, you know, this sort of stuff. But I mean, it doesn't mean that, you know, you actually have to, you know, have your feet on the ground in that, you know, a particular country all the time. It just means, the way I understand physical residency, I think, is that it means it's the place that you really do call home. It's where your home is, where your car is registered, where your driver's license is, this sort of stuff. Now, the reason for, and I think that should resolve the concerns on that. The idea of having the two kinds of residency, the tax and the physical, was never to keep people locked up in a certain country, and the moment they leave, somehow they, you know, they're not eligible anymore. It was just to make sure that this would not be available to people who could legally have tax residency in one country and never go there, you know, and actually live somewhere else. But physical residency, at least, and I mean, you know, here's what Solomon, you know, what everybody thinks on this, but I've never understood physical residency to mean physical presence all the time. I've never understood it to mean that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, physical. Yeah, it doesn't mean the same. It's not a synonym. So I think that's the answer. Is that you as long as you are, you know, a tax resident of another country, regardless of what you do on top of that, you know, as long as you're a tax resident, that qualifies, right? I mean, that's really what we're getting.
Really. I mean, under this proposal, there's tax residency and
and physical, right?
The question is, what does physical residency mean? And I realized, looking at the comments on this, that a lot of people are understanding physical residency to mean that you're sort of locked up, you know, inside, you know, you can't leave or something. And that's absolutely not, at least I've never understood it to mean that at all. I've understood physical residency to be something that's sort of already akin to the bona fide residence test under the foreign earned income exclusion. that certainly doesn't require that you be physically present in that country all the time, right? It's more of a, sort of a domicile, or, this is my center of gravity, or, this is where my permanent home is, sort of stuff. I mean, the purpose of the double residency test was never to keep people physically locked up in a certain country. No, not at all. At least what I've always understood it to be, was simply to prevent somebody from saying tax residency in, some country that has no income taxes, but you really live somewhere else and never go there, sort of thing. I mean, that's what I've understood the requirement to be.
It was the issue raised in 2017 during Trump first tax reform, and two House Ways and Means lawyers asked me, how are you going to prevent somebody really is a resident of U.S. and never leave the country actually claim tax residency of the other country? I said, what would you do? I tossed the question back. They said double residency, from tax residency as well as physical residency.
Maybe physical residence should be understood to be bona fide residency.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. I mean,
there you go.
Yeah, we can
would you agree with
that? We can reword our napkins.
And and by the way, and this is what I think is.
I don't think we need to rework the napkin. I think it's just clarifying.
Yeah, clarify.
It doesn't mean you're locked up, physically in a country. I mean, I've never understood it to mean that, but now I understand the concern better, because when I was looking at the comments and Melody's, question a minute ago, this focus on sort of tracking physical presence, right? I mean, I don't think that's what's going on at all.
Never was the intent. And the intent, double residency, was as a guardrail. If you remember, we talked about guardrail, right? Because government has concern about millionaires and billionaires, and came Trump tax reform in 2017, and so that issue came up.
All right, so let's. All right. So I think that's one thing, and I think this is one benefit. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but I think this is one benefit of our approach that we're doing, is that what we have here is that we have an outline. Like, okay, let's before we make this big law, let's get what we're trying to do and where the weak points are. Let's get those solved. Like, oh yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it just clarifying that a bona fide resident of another country. There you go. That solves it. Would you agree, Kim, with that? Would you? I mean, I think this is the way to do it.
I think the issue is that we have to look at legislation from the point of our critics, and what are they going to come at us with? What's going to derail this process? And so I think the points that Solomon's outlined are actually trying to look at what critics have done in the past, and how we can actually effectively address that and shut that down before they get any traction. Because we've had a number of comments as well, like, well, what about all the people that are going to be haters on this? Yes, we're going to have those people. So the issue is really to look at those weak points up front and try to address them, so that they can't call us fat cats or cheaters or anything else. We can say, well, we understand your concern. We've addressed it here. Oh, that's a concern. We've addressed it here. And focus on the law-abiding, hardworking Americans who live overseas, who are not cheaters, who are not fat cats, who just want a fair shake.
Well said. Thank you very much, Kim. Beautiful answer.
Well done.
Again, right on. All right. Well, let's move on here. All right, here's our next question coming from, and this is from Noah. Noah says, I want to be in compliance. I want to be able to own ETFs wherever I live. My tax rate is much higher than USA. John, you want to hit this one first?
No problem.
All right.
Does he mean under the existing rules?
I think so. And I mean, when I look at this comment, okay, what first thing comes to my mind is like, look, we have really complicated rules on foreign income. And they're so complicated that people don't even know what it actually is. And, the ETF, and essentially what I'm looking at this, when I see this ETF, someone is thinking an ETF is automatically a PFIC. We've talked about this a lot, and we've done a lot. John and I have done a lot of podcasts with Keith on what a PFIC is. And, there's some questions about really, well, is the ownership of a fund interest the same as a stock ownership? Because in order to have a PFIC, you need to have stock ownership in a share. But with funds, you have an interest in a fund, you really don't control the company. So is that really a PFIC? And I have my own PFIC challenge out there. No one's really met it, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and I've seen some things kind of go either way. And it's really, really difficult. And this is one of the, this is the problem. And this is really the significant problem. It's not just for, this is not just the problem for Americans in the U.S. investing worldwide, but really the problem is far more acute for those people overseas. And they're, well, I guess this is a PFIC. I got to do this crazy taxation on it. And the problem is the IRS is not clear. And you have a reasonable argument back and forth, and not a lot of people in our camp, but the other side, well, hey, look, you have a share in a company. If you look at the instructions, like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is a PFIC. I don't think it is, and John knows the context, and John explained the context of when this, 1986, the PFICs, foreign mutual funds weren't really a thing. So why would the tax code give this gift to Wall Street to punish foreign mutual funds and advantage U.S. mutual funds when U.S. mutual funds really weren't a big problem in 1986 for the powers that be. And I think, this is just generally an issue of the complications overall. So, it would make it so much easier for people overseas to invest in foreign mutual funds, invest in ETFs, and not have to worry about this whole debate. So that's my answer on that. And now the other thing about in compliance, and this is always something that drives me nuts a little bit, when people say, well, I'm not in the tax system. I'm like, well, did you ever file a return? Like, yeah, just 30 years ago. All right, well, you're in the tax system. So that's always drives me nuts. It's like, if you never filed a return, okay, then maybe not. But if you ever filed one, you're in. So don't say that word when you're saying, well, I'm just non-compliant. You're in the system and you're non-compliant, and the IRS doesn't have the resources to go after everybody who's non-compliant, and to a large degree.
So Noah, why don't you just buy ETFs on the U.S. exchanges? That solves your problem.
Yeah, and I guess good point. Because if you have a U.S. ETF and there it is, the tax code is. Yeah.
I mean, so look, under the existing rules, if you're able to, just buy ETFs on the U.S. exchanges. I mean, the U.S. is very efficient capital markets. Okay, there's no doubt about that. And if you're sort of, feeling, well, I don't want U.S. ETFs under the proposed rules that we're talking about, well, you're not taxable on foreign source income, and then it would be foreign source income, so you wouldn't be taxable. So either, I think you can solve this problem under the existing rules or under the proposed rules. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, no, if you think that problem could solve it, let us know in the comments if you think that could, or, and there's other issues going on here as well. And I think, the larger issue, and Kim, what do you think about this here? That my claim that I'm like, look, we're dealing with and I think maybe this is the point, that we can't fix everything wrong with the tax code. That's not what we're here to do, because if we try to fix everything wrong with the tax code, well, we'll never end. Because do you see my point? Anything you would want to say to this? Because you're very well spoken.
Well, what I would say about this is I don't know that much about ETFs.
Okay.
So I really can't speak to that. But in terms of solving the tax code, I think you're absolutely right. And again, the proposal that we put forward is focusing on that issue that impacts double taxation. So Americans who are subject to both of those. But you never know. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the tax code overall coming out of the incoming Trump administration, and a lot of desire to simplify it altogether. So I think it's good to keep raising these questions so that as we have chances to talk to legislators, that we have different kinds of scenarios to take to them and to think about as we go through the actual legislative process.
Thank you, Kim. All right. This is great. Fantastic. Okay, so the next question is, back to the point, and this is the point that Melody Hunter said, show me your foreign tax filing. We won't have that, so that's why we're saying, hey, let's go with that bona fide.
Well, okay, then show your rent or your property. There's all kinds of ways to show that you live somewhere else. I really think this concern is incredibly overblown. Look. Anybody knows that if you spend a lot of time somewhere, it's easy for anybody to know you're there for a variety of reasons. Just records of your cell phone. I mean, there's no end of ways of this, and I'm not sure. I don't know why this is such a great level of concern. I do not
I am actually
anticipate
pretty concerned with it, John. I'm actually pretty concerned with it because if you're going to require something other than self-certification, it's going to end up with a return. You're going to have to do a return because you're going to be.
But Anthony, under the foreign earned income exclusion, there's nothing more than the 2555.
That's a return.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not. All it is, in effect, is it's simply a representation that you meet the residence test in another country. That's all it is.
Right. Well, that's what, and I would just say a self-certification is probably the best way to go. And I think that could just be a check spot. Do you live out? Are you a bona fide resident of another country? This is what it means to be a bona fide resident. Yes or no? And I would prefer that because I think if we're going to start looking for any verification, now we're getting into privacy issues, and now we're getting into non-standard data coming in, and that would be more problems. And I don't. And the thing is people could still lie. People can still lie. Yeah, here's my lease agreement.
Is there really a person on the planet who really lives in a place that couldn't prove that they live there?
Well,
is
why
this
should they
really
have
possible in a modern world where everything is digital and
I'm not, John. I'm not saying that that's not possible. Of course, it isn't under the current rules. That's you're saying you're living overseas under the current rules. I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm saying why do we want to go down that road? Why would we want to go down the road of independent verification?
It's just if you're asked to prove it,
right.
I think that's a concern.
And I think that's fair enough to say, okay, well, if you're examined, okay, hey, prove you're overseas. Yeah, here you go. Okay, great. And I would agree with you. That'd be a great way to prove it. If anyone challenges it.
Certainly, issues of proof of not living in the United States should not derail anything we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on. Noah has a follow-up question and about this, and it's kind of funny. I also want to be able to pay taxes in my expensive high-tax country, way higher than the U.S., and be able to live outside of that country when I have remote work. And Noah, we want you to as well. We want you to be able to do that. His comment here, I'm smiling because this is really the weirdness of the U.S. tax code, because you would say, I think if you're someone coming new to this, you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense, because Noah, or if you know something about international taxation, you would say, well, this is strange. Noah would have a big foreign tax credit to apply because he lives in a high tax country, like actually most of our clients. Most of the expats I run into live in a high tax country.
Why is this a problem? Can Noah explain why this is a problem? I don't understand why this is a problem. So you're living in a high tax country, right? Again, is this more confusing physical residency?
Well, I think right, and I think this relates back to his other question. I think this relates back to, hey, look, I'm a tax resident in this country, but I have to often travel outside of it to make money. Is that going to make me now a U.S. person?
That's an issue at all. It's not an issue, okay? I've never understood, and I think we have a consensus here, that physical residency does not.
Well, I think he asked this question before we answered that. I think he asked this question before we said, oh, right, you know what, we should have more of a bona fide residence test.
Look, everybody, am I wrong in saying, okay, that this is to provide
he's got some follow-ups here.
Relieving mechanism for people who do not live in the United States, and are subject to double taxation. That's the overriding principle.
Yeah, and I was wrong too. But this is in Europe. I didn't know that, so sorry about it. Thank you, Noah. All right. So I think Noah's follow-up questions were asked before we sort of clarified that
So let me think about this. So, all right. So he's in Europe. So, it's not clear to me what happens when you move from one European country to another. You automatically shift your tax residence, or you don't?
John, what if it's a role like someone's a consultant for a consultant firm and they're based in one country, but they're sent to other countries for long periods of work on projects? I mean, it would not disrupt, say, if you lived in the Netherlands, that's not going to disrupt your tax residency in the Netherlands because you're on assignment.
No.
Therefore, it should not have an issue back on any kind of physical residency requirements that would be submitted, or not submitted, but your self-certification for the U.S.
I don't think it. I think it's fine. Okay, because again, I think this comes back to this. There was all this talk on, X about the dual tax residency requirement. Okay, the tax residency and the physical residency, and the physical residency does, at least from my point of view, was never intended to mean that you actually have to be physically present. Okay, that's a different issue altogether. I mean, Canada, for example, trust me, okay, is going to treat you as being, having, physically resident in Canada when you're doing consulting outside Canada, et cetera. I mean, all this is a mechanism. I think this is all this is, right? Is a mechanism to prevent somebody from officially having tax residence in one place and never going to that place and just using the legal designation of tax residence to somehow, avoid taxation. This was never intended to create opportunities for non-taxation. Okay, although it might in certain circumstances end up that way, it was never intended to do that. It's just intended to make sure that if you're not going to pay tax in the U.S., you're paying tax somewhere. I think, isn't that all it is?
Yeah, and I guess, and I think it's like, I guess my question would be then, why does it have to be that way? Because essentially what it would do, and Solomon, I'll ask you this question, essentially what it would do is it makes now the IRS the policeman to make sure that someone is getting taxed somewhere.
Actually, the real purpose is overseas Americans who got dual tax residency only pay tax, file tax, and report tax on U.S. source income, period. So that means forever non-U.S. source income will be not taxable. To me, that really is big deal. And you can't tax non-U.S. source income. It means freedom in my book, okay? And people like Donna will not Donna Lane wouldn't be renouncing, right? And so when you look at this, you say, we want to provide relief, but who are the people we want to help? And especially, remember she testimony was she maybe own $300 tax, but her CPA bill will be $2,500, okay? And so by end of the day, and she had to, but actually what break the camel's back was the issue of reporting her assets under FATCA. That's totally unconstitutional in my book. And she being treated as second-class citizen. And so based on that, and she made her choice. And so if we're going to prevent this kind of stuff happening again, especially when Trump rebuilt U.S. manufacturing base, and we need more Americans go abroad selling our goods and services and be U.S. goodwill ambassadors. And then we have to take care of those people now. This is the year to do it. How's that?
All right,
Can I just add in?
Yeah, absolutely, Kim, of course.
I think the issue is, the idea is not that we're trying to force taxation on people. So for instance, if you live in a country where there isn't taxation, like Cayman Islands, no income, we're not saying that under these rules, you've got to find and live someplace that you have income tax. That's not it. It's really about ensuring that people are not gaming the system. And going back to the earlier point, this is about the critics who are going to say, well, what about these people who, say that they're registered in the Cayman Islands, but are actually living in, I don't know, I keep going back to the Netherlands because I live there, and a very high tax, 52%. So, it's this issue, and we have to be realistic that these kinds of questions are going to come up. And we need to be able to address them in order to make sure we keep progressing forward. So the idea is not to make the US into a policeman. It's not to make you choose your country based on a minimum tax level. It's to ensure that you're not gaming the system. And because those people are going to hold us back from actually getting relief for the vast majority of American citizens.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim. And I think we could really see where some of the criticism will come. If you're joining us, we see a lot more people filling in. Really, we've been talking about what we've been addressing for the most part since we started is really the issue of how do we prove that you are someone who is being double taxed and subject to relief. And so I think Kim and Solomon and John have done a great job so far explaining our goal is to make sure that someone can't game it. The reason why we need to do that is because our critics are going to raise that issue and it could potentially derail it. And so we want to make sure we're able to address that. Do you think I said it right there, Kim?
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
I would add to that. Anthony. But I think that the concern here is gaming. This means that you're really living in the United States but claiming you're not. Right. That's what gaming is.
That is, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
That was the issue brought up, and I, tossed back and I asked the question: how do you prevent that then? 2017.
Essentially, you're not living in the U.S., and I think it may be, it's the proof. Like, well, that's what we're really concerned with, that you're not actually living in the U.S.
Yeah, so
that's how you could game the system, right? In
another country is a very significant guardrail, okay? Because in most countries of the world, tax residency is a huge problem, and I can tell you, I live in Canada, and believe me, I've always been unhappy of being a tax resident of Canada.
Well, back to Canada, when people say gaming the system,
I was unhappy of being a tax resident of the Netherlands too, right?
Well, John, when people say gaming the system, there's already kind of ways to game the system as it is, and we've talked about this. That it's actually my opinion for tax purposes, the best citizenship in the world to have is Canadian tax or residency, but not live in Canada. And then you're allowed to live in the United States, claiming a closer connection test, I guess, up to 183 days, and not have to pay taxes. You live in the U.S. all this time, and then hey, maybe you live in Mexico the rest of the time. So there's actually ways, and I think that just might be something we keep in mind when people say, "Oh my God, people are gonna game the system." Like, whoa, let's just look at what's happening now, how it can be gamed.
The people who game the system best include the digital nomad types, right? This is real. This is pretty good.
Legally, right now, right?
Legally, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Just game the system. I would just say, U.S. citizenship does have tax benefits at certain times, okay? It's one of the few citizenships where using the foreign earned income exclusion, for example, you can avoid paying taxes in the U.S. and then by avoiding, other than the self-employment tax, issue, which some people solve through CFCs, etc. But, U.S. citizenship is a very good citizenship for digital nomad, for sort of small-time digital nomads until they start accumulating all the benefits, right?
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. And I think Jack Dack had a comment here. And I see a few people. Oh, I'm missing a whole. Oh, here, let me go on. I jumped ahead here. All right, great. Let's move on. And Carl's just to back up this quick point here, Carl, right? Americans specifically come by U.S. ETFs at Charles Schwab. There you go, right? So thank you very much for that. Let's see here. Natalie has something here. Let's see what she's got here. Wouldn't it be cheaper for the U.S. just to stop the unnecessary filing? People don't even. I think this is a question probably, and this seems like, Natalie, I think this does seem a question for larger tax reform, right? Larger tax reform. And I would say this, Natalie, I do follow the U.S. One of the groups on Facebook I follow and I'm part of is U.S. Expat Tax on Facebook. And pretty much any day of the year, like the questions never stop. Someone's going to ask the question, do I have to file a tax return? And then if I happen to catch it, I'll send them the link to the IRS where they have a very lengthy questionnaire of whether or not you have to file a tax return. I have caught a couple times where it's actually not correct. You do have an obligation where you don't, but for the most part, it will give you the correct answer. However, what you'll notice when you go through this questionnaire, whether or not you have to file a tax return, goes on for something. I think there's 20 different questions it asks. And so that, Natalie, the problem is that it is so complicated. And then you'll get these conflicting rules, that seemingly conflicted rules that will say, well, look, if your income is below the standard exemption, you don't have to file. Well, that's true for certain kinds of income. For other kinds of income, you do have to file. And then for other kinds of income, that standard deduction doesn't apply. If all your income is from long-term capital gains, and you're married, you can have about $88,000 of income come into you tax-free every year. So a lot of these things, it gets so complicated on whether or not you have to file a return, but I think that's going to be an issue for the overall tax reform package. This is something that, unless I'm wrong, Solomon,
what I propose to President Trump and what President Trump pledged to do is helping Natalie, right? In this case, she may not owe anything to U.S. government, and her CPA bill will be $700. It's so unnecessary.
It's
right?
so unnecessary, yeah.
And so by only paying U.S. source income tax or file for U.S. source income tax, and she can totally avoid that, right? So, it is a first step, guys. It's a first step to sever citizenship and residency, okay? And because eventually we want to go to residency-based taxation, but you're not going to get there one step. And if we try it, we'll be like 2017 Trump tax reform all over again. We'll fail.
Didn't go our way. No, it didn't go our way.
Yeah.
Hey, we got, go ahead, John.
One, I had a thought on the question about was it Natalie, about the tax filing?
Yeah.
I'd be interested in everybody's reaction to this. So there's a standard deduction, what is it, around $12,000-$13,000?
It's 14,700.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's 13, whatever it is. Okay, 13,000. I think an interesting way to approach this, let's imagine, okay, that none of this stuff goes anywhere. Okay, I think another thing that might be worth working on is there a way through regulation that IRS could take the position that for Americans abroad, okay, for example, who meet the the requirements to use the foreign earned income exclusion if they want, that if their income is below, okay, a certain level, or even the amount of the, to remove the filing requirement altogether. Okay. She's talking about a filing requirement, and I agree that, for most of these people, that's, it doesn't amount to anything other than they're spending money. Why not for Americans abroad? I mean, I'm not sure what the mechanism would be for this. I'd have to think about it, but why not for Americans abroad come up with something that, if their income is below whatever, $100,000 from all sources, that there's no requirement.
Doesn't matter the type of income, right? That would really solve it. Hey, look, we don't care what kind of income it was. Under this amount, you don't have to file anything. And I don't know. I'm not sure how you would get there. I mean, I have to think that through. But I notice a couple of things, okay, where, there have been sort of olive branches to Americans abroad. You look at the Form 8938 requirement, right? If you're a U.S. resident, I think the threshold is $50,000 of specified foreign financial assets. If it's a U.S. citizen abroad, it's $200,000, okay? So, I mean, that's a different rule for a U.S. citizen abroad. And I'm wondering if there might not be a way for U.S. citizens abroad to say no filing requirement at all if income from all sources is below a certain level. I mean, obviously that's a stopgap, but that seems to me, if it can be done under the code or the regulations, as a very reasonable thing to do. Kim, your thoughts on that?
Again, I just want to point out that this is a backup plan. I think this is John's plan. in case the things don't go forward. So I'm hoping that this is something John doesn't have to think about at all. I'm hoping we're actually going to move forward and get some legislation that will provide relief, whether it's a legislative fix or a regulatory fix. We've talked about the fact it's possible to do both.
We're talking about the legislative fix first, and we're not going to talk too much about the regulatory fixes, which we have gone into significant depth. And I want to get to Miles right here. This is Miles Wakeham. Miles and I did a podcast together because Miles is a great guy, and we've talked for years. And I was just sort of on one of my rants, believe it or not, about how terrible the United States of America is. And Miles just had to back me up. He goes, Anthony, hang on a second. America isn't all that terrible. Miles is from Australia. And I said, you know what, Miles? I want you on the podcast. You explain to me, as an American, what makes America great. And you can go look up the podcast on IRSMedic, and it was great. It was incredibly enlightening for me, for someone who's grown up here. And Miles says, he said this, and I think, and I have not stopped thinking about this since he said it. He said, Americans are the most inventive people on the planet. And I was like, you know what? I think he's got something there. So Miles, always a pleasure to have you here. So here's his question: would non-U.S. residents who do business under a separate business entity, such as an IBC, be required to file excessive compliance form for the entity, or would that go away too?
Here's how you answer the question. Remember that this is to treat people as non-resident aliens. Would a non-resident alien who owns a separate non-U.S. corporation be required to file a 5471? Yes or no?
No.
There's your answer.
There it is. All right. Well, hey, I think, Miles, we got the answer. That's a pretty good answer. So thanks for joining us. And by the way, Noah says we did solve the issue. So there it is. So thanks, Noah. And Noah just brought up some good points about how do we want to define people overseas. All right. So let's get going down a little bit more. So how about this from Jack Dack? What does this mean for overseas retirement accounts if someone's there?
Would a non-resident alien who has a pension plan outside the United States be required to include income or file information returns with respect to that non-U.S. entity? Yes or no?
No.
There's your answer.
All right. I like that. Mona Lisa, love this, right? John and I were just talking about this. I think we all were talking about this one. So Solomon, I think maybe we were talking about this over the weekend. I hope Trump would allow restoration of citizenship if this passes, because we're talking about Donnelly Nelson.
Right.
And she was throwing up, renouncing her citizenship because she couldn't get a bank account and live. And it was a horrible experience for her, but she had no other choice. And someone like that, I would love to see if she would be able to just get her citizenship restored. Any hope that we could get something like that?
Well, that would be next step.
Okay.
I think that is a possibility and opportunity to do that. President Trump is talking about do away with birthright citizenship. And when you do that, and you definitely can add something, those people do not appreciate America. They got their citizenship because by accident, because whatever the reason, right? Their parents were here and gave birth, and some of them deliberately come here and to give birth. And so if we're going to do away with that, but for people like Donnelly Nelson, give up her citizenship based on principle. Each time I thought about her as a gold standard, okay? Yeah. And the woman suffered, and she didn't play a game, try to game the system. And she did the right thing, honorable thing, right? And I think if she chooses to reapply, we should have given her citizenship back. That's my view. And I will fight for that, for her.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this username. I love it. Professor of Stuffology. This is great. This is wonderful. This is hilarious. I don't know if we're really going to get into this question, though, because income tax is an excise tax according to SCOTUS recently. I'm not sure if I saw that. And this is known the privilege says we have a right to work, so income tax must be unlawful. Look, as professor of Stuffology, I have
not all income tax. That was if you're talking about the Moore decision and the commentary, that was corporation income.
Okay, so excuse me again, John, could you repeat that? Maybe I don't understand. Could you repeat that again?
I don't understand it either.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm not sure where the excise tax is, but I would say,
I think
we could.
Talking about, Anthony, is this, okay? That, and we saw a lot of this in the briefs filed in the recent Moore case, was arguing that a tax on corporations was actually an excise tax, okay, and not an income tax, and therefore the whole Moore issue was irrelevant. Now, if that's what the professor is talking about, then I think the answer is we're talking about individuals, okay, and not corporations. But beyond that, I have no thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, and I would just say, professor of stuffology, I have so many things wrong with the federal income tax. We don't have time to, and it's not going to help get this through. That's the problem. Is that I think so I have to monitor myself and work incrementally. A lot of things go on, so it's like just ending this particular abuse. And I think for myself, this would be the first meeting. We have everything sort of going the wrong way. Just to get one thing to go the right way. I don't know what we would do. Kim, my point is that, look, I have so many problems with the federal income tax, but I'm not really mentioning them here because where's it going to go? The opportunity isn't there yet, I don't think.
Well, I think the Supreme Court decision was in 1913 that implemented income tax. I don't think it's something we can overturn. But again, I point to the fact that people in the incoming Trump administration are talking repeatedly about the inefficiency of the U.S. income tax, about the loopholes built into it. Elon Musk is talking about it quite a lot.
That's funny. You got right to the next. You're really good. You do have a segue to my next comment. Here, where it is? Oh, here it is. Things are coming in. Yeah. Here it is. That was the very next comment we're gonna get to. So, we'll see. I think just getting some positive momentum for me. I'm like, hey, look, I just want to get some positive momentum going. And if we could just, if we could help Donna Lane Nelson, who's a real person, and all the people similarly situated, or even people different, that would be that would be wonderful. And I guess, Kim, while you're here, this is Melody Hunter's back with this one, and I think this is exactly what we're trying to address, right? This question right here.
No, I'm not at all concerned with that.
Yeah.
No, we're not worried about that, but we have to consider that there might be people who will make questions about that. And well, John and I have talked about it. There are some rules that favor non-resident aliens in terms of like capital gains tax on equities, for instance. And so maybe we should address that and remove the penalty for domestic and overseas Americans versus non-resident aliens. So there are ways of addressing it, but we do have to consider, even if it's a handful of people, the opposition to things always drag up the worst possible case. They never argue from the median. Yeah. And so you have to consider what the worst possible case is and consider, can you address it? And in some cases, like I said, the goal here, I think what we would all love to see is, like, my husband is British. The UK does not give a toss about where he lives, what his income is, unless it's in the United Kingdom. And I think that's where we all want to go eventually. And as Solomon says, we're not going to be able to take that step in one leap, but we have to take the step as we can take them. And we just have to be able to address some of these extreme situations that might come up. But I'm not worried about that. I want people to be able to live where they are and earn where they are and be able, like we've said, live the American dream wherever they are.
Yeah. I think
by the way, back to Noah did has a follow-up question on the ETFs. It's like, there's another problem that I don't think we addressed. So here it is. This is what he's saying. It's like, well, look, it sounds like he's saying I could buy ETFs inside the US, but then I'm going to be taxed on the country I'm living in. It looks like that's what he's saying.
Yeah, what he's saying. If there was no double taxation, there would be no obstacle. That's true. But if we don't have your support, we cannot save through the most common financial. I mean, you're saying under the current rules, there's a bunch of problems. Yeah.
But I think, but no, if we got this through, we wouldn't. This is what you're looking for.
Well, the point is, again, this seems to be. I want to repeat this 3 times, okay? Because this seems to be the missing link on a lot of these questions. Okay. So what we're proposing is that U.S. citizens who don't live in the United States are taxed as non-resident aliens. meaning they're taxed in the same way as people who are not U.S. citizens who don't live in the United States. Is the U.S. going to be harassing people who are not U.S. citizens, but citizens and residents of other country when they start investing in non-U.S. entities or products? Clearly not.
So then it sounds like our 4 points of our napkin would solve the problem. Like, yeah, no, if we're successful, no, the problem's solved.
First point, my recollection, I'm not very visual, so I don't remember these things very well, but I think the first point was that they're treated as non-resident aliens, right? So what does that mean? What that means is that you're not a U.S. citizen and you're not a U.S. resident, and therefore you're taxable only on income that's related to the U.S.
Yeah. He's clarifying it. Yeah, if I currently have to buy it from U.S., then right. Okay, got it. No, perfect. Well, that's why we hope to get this through.
Of course, you have to deal with double taxation, but that's not U.S. caused double taxation. That's double taxation caused by your country of residence that's taxing on your worldwide income. That includes the U.S. source income. Yes, it's double taxation, but we can't get rid of double taxation caused by other countries. We're having enough trouble getting rid of double taxation caused by U.S. citizenship. Jesus, give us a break.
All right. Well, all right. Very good.
All right. Here.
Yeah. So no, we don't want to force you to buy ETFs from the U.S. and deal with the issue at all. We're hoping we get this through, so it will solve the problem. But I want to get to here's Jeremy's. Jeremy, thank you so much for this comment. When adopting common reporting standards allow the feds to end FATCA with less problems and make banking uniform worldwide. Well, I think this question might be going a little bit outside of what we're trying to do here. Because I think one of the things that the common reporting standards the U.S. hasn't signed on to, and FATCA is one way. FATCA is there's no information sharing with FATCA. It's only information collecting by the United States of America. It doesn't work both ways, and I think there's reasons for FATCA that go beyond ensuring tax compliance. I think there's other reasons going on for that. So I'm not sure. I don't see this. I don't see ending FATCA ends the problem. But go ahead, John. What would you say?
No, I think the answer is no. I mean, if the U.S. adopts the CRS, all it means is they're joining a multilateral arrangement to both exchange information.
Right. To actually,
it obligates them to do something, but to receive information, and they're still, I suppose, entitled to receive information because of citizenship taxation. I mean, the CRS contemplates the acceptance of the tax residency rules for all the countries that have signed on to it. So, maybe it would be administratively better, but I don't see it as solving this problem at all.
Thank you. Kim, do you see any relevancy to what we're doing here? I mean, I think that's really a separate issue. I don't see it really working.
I'm opposed to anything which has more opportunity of my information to go into other countries at any point in time. I am in favor of limiting all of that and getting out of as much of it as possible. I did not like the idea of being tracked anywhere in the world by anybody.
Beautiful answer. And Kim, you know what? You're right. And you made me think about the whole why the U.S. would never do this. Because U.S. banks would have to information share and deal with the compliance costs. That's an issue for foreign banks. And they are not going to be doing that. And then if there was a common reporting standard, all of our information would be going to overseas. And like FATCA, the United States of America gets information on people who are not Americans, but they're suspected of being Americans. And so likewise,
being American.
Yeah. And are you American or have you ever been American? Well, I have.
Are you or ever have you ever been American?
Can I just jump back to Melody? Because I think I misread her question.
Okay, yeah. Absolutely.
And the circumstance that she'd presented is basically that would be solved by this situation. So if people are living overseas, no matter what amount of money they have, they're non-resident alien, none of their income is being taxed by the U.S. if it's outside the U.S. So this is not the situation that we're looking at. As we've said before, the billionaire question, I think, primarily had to do with stuff that happened in the past, where people who were parts of big companies like Facebook took their shares, were non-citizens, got out, sold for billions of dollars, and then didn't have to pay any capital gains tax due to our current rules. Those are the kind of situations that people might ask about. But if you're really that wealthy and you're living in the Cayman Islands and you don't have any U.S. source income, good on you. That's not an issue that would cause a problem under these rules.
and Kim, what I would say is if, critics are saying this, like, oh my God, billionaires are going to be able to game the system. Well, I would just say, well, who writes the tax code?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, where's this stuff come from? And really, if you do engage in, tax planning, like I have for years, I don't necessarily run into the clients, because here's the problem. There's excellent tax shelters out there, incredible tax shelters that will also exempt you from state taxation. So you could live anywhere you want. However, in order to take advantage of these terrific tax shelters, you need to be wealthy already. So the billionaires game the system as it is so much, but it's a legal system. They game it legally. So they have incredible options that the person who's trying to build wealth doesn't have. And so that's what I would say. And I think it's something to keep important in this discussion when people are claiming billionaires are going to game the system. Oh boy, they already own it. They wrote it. So,
But Anthony,
go ahead, John.
What if they do? Look, I mean, to
Yeah.
some extent, the question is: should 98% of humanity be locked up and and have all these horrible requirements imposed on them because of a few wealthy people? I mean, I think that is absolutely insane. I think that basically, if countries are concerned about this, the only thing they damn well do is make their economic environment attractive enough so people want to stay.
Yeah. No, we are trying to stop that global taxation. And that, maybe you didn't get that. Maybe you're coming in a little later. But no, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Okay, so Mona Lisa, thank you for joining us. Many of us felt essentially forced to renounce under duress because of FATCA. We know about that.
You feel that you are. Absolutely. Look,
you are, right.
On this, good God. These are forced renunciations. Okay, we're living in a world where multiple citizenships are considered valuable, on a par with financial assets, etc. People are renouncing U.S. citizenship because they cannot comply with the costs and laws of complying with it. And the people who are renouncing are not generally wealthy people. They are people of modest means who simply cannot live in their country of residence, either because of punitive U.S. taxation on foreign income sources or assets, or because of banking assets. To be clear, people are renouncing only because they're forced to. That's it. Okay?
Yeah.
Well
Back
said.
at
Go ahead, Solomon.
10 million.
Yeah, it really did. And Mona Lisa has a couple of things to add. All their horrendous paperwork and having to rely on expensive condors. Me being one of those expensive condors, which I understand, and that's why I want to end it. And this is something that I run into, is that international taxation is so incredibly complicated, and things will vary country by country, and it's endless. And one of the problems of expensive condors, one of the reasons why they're so expensive, is because there's so much to know, and they can still make mistakes, and it still happens. And it's because there's just way too much to know, and that's really a problem. And again, Mona Lisa's being impacted by the PFIC regime as well, which it was never meant to apply. I don't think it was never meant to apply to. We got a question here, and I don't know if we want to really get into this today, but it's gonna be questions we're gonna get up. Has anyone here on the panel spoken directly with Darren Lahoud? He's got a bill he presented. I have my opinions on that. I'm not going to get into that, but I don't know if Solomon, have you ever talked to Darren Lahoud?
Yeah, I kind of talk about it, and
have you spoken to him though?
No.
Okay.
I talk about in many ways strength is strength in unity. I totally understand that, but at the same time, I just don't see. Okay, because I know how IRS, Treasury think about what so-called accidental Americans, and they are ATM machine to them. Okay, and there is a price for each one of them coming to compliance, and either for renunciation or for tax compliance. And so there is a price on that. And any bill, grant amnesty, as far as Congressional Budget Committee, Budget Office concerned, will score very poorly because the potential revenue is gone. And my question always is, do we want to be part of that process and bring our bill down? By the way, 2017, we were part of Trump tax reform. We didn't have that issue. But then Chairman Kevin Brady of the Ways Means Committee told my buddy Grover Norcrest, and they couldn't score the bill because it's way too expensive for Trump to pay, to pay for. Now we have the same problem. Be honest with you. The problem is, if you remember, Trump want to pass the the continuation budget and bill, and wants to remove the limit of the debt. And that part got stripped and failed. And that immediately tells me next year, unless House pass remove that budget limit, borrowing limit, and our problem is going to be how are you going to pay for it? Now, do we want to get into a situation, make our proposed 4 principles on the napkins more expensive because strength in unity? Hell no, right? No, that is a philosophical side. Those people decided over the weekend, they even debate me. We don't know the law. We were not told we had to be in compliance. Don't blame us. And too expensive for us to pay to be in compliance. We need your help to pass a get out jail card. All right. Now, that is truly politics as usual. Okay. So in my mind, I just can't imagine. Okay. If Trump asked me to write a border security bill, I put it in amnesty for 20 million illegal aliens. On top of that, give them spending money to settle. You think he's going to sign that bill, or he's going to kick me out? So politically speaking, and philosophically speaking, it's a bad idea. So this time, strength in unity doesn't apply. I care about the ones they need help.
So if I can restate what you've said, and Kim, I'm going to watch your comments on this. Is you're saying that, hey, look, the Lahoud bill, whatever it is, it's going to come back and it's going to score too high. Essentially, right? It's going to cost too much, and so then what's going to happen is there's going to need, because with our pay-go budgeting, our revenue neutral budgeting, the way the game works is that you have you have what this is going to cost the government, right? And then you got to find revenue offsets, right? Yeah. And typically, what's happened in the world of tax, we see this happening again and again. That in order to pay for some domestic tax cut, they have to find other sources of revenue, and they always typically go overseas for a more abusive taxation, because specifically there is no lobby. Specifically, there is no one who's going to push back, because every U.S. expat's vote is diluted across the country. So it's a way to make sure they don't have a voice. And that's really the political climate that we're operating under, is that we have these pay-go offsets that need to be paid somewhere, and it's the same people who always have to pay for them. Now, this is what I would say, is that I think one of the things, and this is probably too much for doing this, but we had a pay-go offset. We had a pay-go offset, and that pay-go offset was FATCA. And so I think one of the things that, and Kim, this is sort of where maybe I'm going to go way too off the deep end with this, but what I would say is, I think the way to prevail is to actually go and audit some of the CBO's findings. It's like, wait a second, guys. You said FATCA was going to bring in all this money. It actually ended up costing the IRS more money than it brought in. So why should we trust your word on your revenue projections when they're always off. And by the way, their Congressional Budget Office, PAYGO says that all spending is going to be revenue neutral. However, as Solomon just said, Trump wants the borrowing limit eliminated. So, well, that's weird. If we're supposed to have balanced budgets through PAYGO, but PAYGO always ensures that it's never balanced because there's no accountability from what CBO says is going to happen and what actually happens. And maybe this is just an entirely issue that I don't know if we want to get into the weeds on this, but again and again, every single time, those PAYGO projections are always off.
Totally. But the key for us, remember we talk about travel light, and the whole thing is going to be 60 days to 90 days. And you get into argument, got bogged down, you've been left behind again. Okay. And this time I got a president's pledge. I'm not going to get left behind, period. We're pushing forward.
So do you think I could be doing the hey, look, there's so many problems with the tax code and also the huge problems with Congress as well. And I probably not something that we could fix with this, right?
No, we can, including Elon Musk, including Vivek, and just take them too long to streamline government and to cut the waste and bring efficiency back. We can't take the money. Yeah, I love it too. I mean, we can't take the money supposedly they saved and to apply, because by then, wait for their saving, the bill, I mean, the tax reform bill already passed. We missed it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and I think that's just not. That's one issue I would want to fight, but I don't think we have the ability to do it. Maybe somebody will appoint me. I wouldn't mind that to appoint me to the PAYGO auditor. I'd love to audit the CBO.
Yeah,
hey, these are all the things that you said would happen. Let's go through about what actually happened. So if you can't tell if your record of predicting the truth is basically 0%, why should we believe your next promises? I think, but again, that might be an issue. But I think that's
separate argument, right? Not for this time. Right. Not for what we try to accomplish.
And if we could just avoid the entire argument, I think maybe that's the point why, look, we don't want to get into a spendy bill because we don't have the ability to challenge the whole PAYGO premise. We don't. So we gotta like make sure this doesn't cost too much. Kim, would you say that's kind of where we're at?
I think the issue we have is that Trump has laid out a couple of things: no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, ending double taxation. And these are priorities he wants to drive through. And so in terms of the offsets at the moment, okay, that's going to be for the bean counters to sort out. But we have the political will from the president to push this through. And that's why Solomon says this is a streamlined proposal. This proposal doesn't help every overseas American, but it should help a vast majority of the people that are out there. And therefore, whether or not how Trump is going to fight this politically, what kind of capital he's going to use or how he's going to push it through, I don't know. But these are all things that he has put forward more on a moral basis than on a balance the checkbook issue.
Right.
All right. Great answer. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Our next question is from Sanjay. I think the Patriot Act, which will preclude expats from investing in U.S. assets unless they have a U.S. address. Because John, because essentially, it's like, hey, is this taxable? Well, you're going to be taxed like a non-resident alien. It's like, okay, so then it's U.S. source income, so it would be taxable. But I guess my own answer to this would be like, I don't think any of the proposals are making someone no longer a U.S. person, but the question about a U.S. address, though, I don't know. What do we think about that? Anyone?
No, I don't think that's an issue.
Okay, because they are U.S. persons.
You get a U.S. address, if that's the issue. I mean, there are plenty of people who do that now. I think that's the type of thing that may affect some people while they're putting together their investment profiles at certain times, but I suspect that can be worked around. And, remember, that this does not, the whole purpose of this is to change the way people are taxed, but allow them to retain their citizenship, right? So they remain U.S. persons and that. I mean, I know that there are, pockets of difficulties here and there, but I suspect they can be sorted out. In any case, it has nothing to do with, this particular tax proposal.
Yeah, and I would just say you probably, I do recommend for U.S. expats to have a U.S. mailing address anyway, because getting things overseas is never a guarantee. So I would just say that. So you probably would want that anyway. Okay, so all right, we got a comment from Geza. I think this is exactly what we're not going to talk about, Geza. Comprehensive tax reform options, and this, but Solomon, this may ultimately, I mean, I guess we're kind of hoping is this actually does wind up in the comprehensive tax reform. It's just not a standalone bill, but or would it, or do we care?
Well, comprehensive, tax reform is needed, but not. I don't think Trump is going to do it under his 2025 tax reform package. And the other thing is he also talked about eventually getting away from income tax and go to tariffs. Now, I love that idea and get rid of IRS, right? But are we going to get there immediately? I don't know. It depends on what Vivek and Elon find out and document it and sell to people. But now one thing, actually, it was very powerful. Okay, remember House tried to pass a continued resolution, 1,500 pages long, 40% increase for Congress. Okay, guess how they shut down? Elon and Vivek and Trump go on Twitter and got it totally shut down, right? So that tells me we actually have a platform. And just the bottom line is president needs to get in front of the people. And it can be done. But this time, I don't see it. We're traveling 60 days, no more than 90 days.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's going to be coming. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it's, and I guess there's something that I just realized, wait a second, this is not a situation where we are trying to get the attention of the president to say, hey, we have a really important thing we need you to do. We have a really, really important thing we need to do. We already did it.
Yeah,
and he already promised it.
Yeah.
So we actually have a campaign promise. And so, Kim, it seems like more of our goal here is to, how do we make it as easy as possible for Donald Trump to fulfill his campaign promise? Is that kind of what we're after here?
Yep, that's correct. And I think, again, whether you love or hate Trump, one of the things he ran on was promises made, promises kept. And again, that's why I think it's great that we have both the legislative option, which is our preferred option, but regulatory options as well. So we have options for the president to meet his promises, even if Congress is recalcitrant.
Beautiful. All right. So that's really what we're after. How do we help Donald Trump fulfill his campaign promise? And so our job is, and so what we're doing is like, well, we're going to be attacking the criticism that comes, right? So that's what we're all about here. So our Noah has, and I guess Noah's really he's coming back on the ETFs because he just said these, and I guess I didn't realize how essential these are for people investing, Americans overseas, because the tax code is in the term, depending on your interpretation of what it means, it really has been hard. Let me see here. Let's see here. Melody Hunter has a way to game the system here. The easiest way to not game the system, okay, would be an option for foreign. Oh, okay. So, So it would be an option for foreign.
At the moment, I think our main concern is really about the double taxation of Americans living overseas. And, I appreciate the idea, but we're looking at the past criticisms that Solomon's noted and looking to address those. And I think we kind of need to just focus on the options that are currently on the table.
Yeah. So remember also, right, that there's any talk about the foreign earned income exclusion assumes remaining taxable under the current rules.
Yeah.
Okay. Non-resident aliens do not have the benefit of using the foreign earned income exclusion.
There you go. right. And I think this is a great observation by Geza. We have an opportunity to talk about comprehensive tax reform and educate the public about the options on the table. Trump is entertaining all ideas. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And Geza, I'm 100% with you on this. We have a once in a, I don't even know if lifetime, once in a nation's history, I think. And I think John and I have talked about, like, look, if 2025, we don't get the result, it's never going to happen. I don't see it. This is our best chance. So,
well, this is clearly the best opportunity I've ever seen. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got, President Trump is, clearly open to all kinds of new ideas, including taxation. We've got the pledge to end the double taxation. And we've got the Republicans controlling everything. And we've got activity, on sort of the congressional level with Representative Lahoud, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is probably about as good as it's ever going to get. And
I would say so. Yeah, and I think this is, I love Geza. He's got some great comments. Here's another one he's got. He's like, if you guys talk about the flat tax, fair tax, and goods and service tax, you would attract a larger audience. Well, Geza, I have done other videos on the flat tax, and what's better tariffs or the fair tax. I've had the fair tax guys on. So, I do keep there is a lot of that content on there, and it's gotten a lot of views. I am not trying to throw everything in here, though. That's the point. If I throw everything in at the same time, we could end up with nothing. So, that's really the strategy on this one. And Trump did not.
So everybody's aware, by the way. Everybody's aware that the fair tax, okay, as in Jim Bennett and Steve Hayes fame, right, would all the tax problems of Americans abroad, right, because it turns into a U.S.-based consumption tax.
Yep.
So, well, seriously, so. I mean, I think Americans abroad ought to be aware of that generally, and I think generally should be.
Yeah, and I've had Jim Bennett on talking about it, and he actually, and this is what I conclude with. I'm not necessarily a fan of the fair tax because I don't want the government to have that much money. I don't. But under the current constraint, and this is what I concluded with Jim Bennett, is that, well, if our goal is to try to find a way to raise the similar amount of revenue, tariffs won't do it. Can't. I mean, the amount of imports, you'd have to tax tariffs at 120% or something to get the revenue. You're not going to be able to do that. So then the fair tax would be the way to do it. But I just disagree with the premise that we need that much federal government. And that's kind of where we're at. But if you want to check out that video, I think he lays it out very well. And a lot of the promises that they say, he actually explains how they could actually work. Like, how do you actually get rid of the IRS? Which is like, come on, you're collecting. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, they actually have a way to do it. So it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
So I believe that the DOJ department is looking to deliver their final impact by America's 250th birthday, which is in the summer of 2026. And so I think if we look at the political landscape going forward, if I understand correctly, Solomon, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have the opportunity to pass 2 bills in the next year without needing a 2/3 majority in the Senate. And I think the first one they're looking at doing is about the border, and the second one is about the tax. But for Trump, and from a pure political landscape, he has to get that done early because he needs the impacts to come in the country in order for the 2026 midterms to not be a bloodbath, which they normally are for the incumbent party. And so looking at that time frame, we're not able to take on massive comprehensive tax reform from a pure political perspective. But Elon Musk is talking about it. He's 100% correct. I think he's even mentioned fair tax or flat tax. He's mentioned something like that in things that he's done. So it's not impossible to look for something like that being done. I think we'd all love a complete overhaul of this cumbersome system, but it's not something that's likely to happen in 2025. The political schedule is against it, but it's something we could be pushing for, with an eye on 2026, for example.
Right. And also, from my perspective, right, and I saw President Trump ending double taxation and why, we need to do that. And then now we want to go beyond if his pledge or our mandate, that is bad politics, also bad policy. That once got bogged down, that's even bad for overseas Americans. As simple as that. And that's why keep a focus on the ball and get it through, and we will. And we can get it done this time.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right, we've got Jason Miller chiming in here. Gaming systems shouldn't even be discussed. Remember that taxes are based on voluntary disclosure. There will always be people who do illegal things, and it's up to the IRS to audit.
I agree totally.
And Jason Miller,
you can never stamp out.
And what I would say,
absolutely,
and it's up to the IRS to audit. And I would just say this, and this here's the reality: as someone who does the IRS examinations and represents people and wins audits and does all of that, the IRS does not in any way, shape, or form have the auditor's appeals team it used to have 15 years ago. And this is a huge change that has happened to the IRS, and I watched it happen. When I started my business with my dad in 2006, we started doing this. We were dealing with a lot of IRS employees who were closer to my dad's age. And they all joined government service because they were inspired by the words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in his inauguration. Ask not what you can do for your country, or ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So my dad was an Ivy Leaguer, went to Brown, but he decided on a career in public service, as did a ton of us classmates and others. And so one of the things that we found when we got into tax resolution in 2006 was that there were incredibly brilliant people, really sharp, who did extra effort to make things work. And they also kept an eye on generally like, okay, is this workable or not? Well, what happened is they retired. And you do not have the same spirit of the core that you once did. Because these people have left and the mentorship isn't there. And the amount of talent it took to keep the IRS running isn't there. And we're all pretending that it's there, and it's not. And so, go ahead.
I will make 2 points. Remember, Biden hired 70,000 additional IRS agents to audit our books. Remember that?
Yeah.
And on top of it, DOJ, IRS, they do political audits and political persecution.
Yeah.
And do you want to be part of that, right? And do you want to be subject to this kind of abuse? So my thing is, from our perspective, we put in guardrail is to satisfy the ones complain about somebody gaming system. Okay, just shut them up. Right.
I mean, the system is right.
Yeah, it's not our problem to, it's not our problem to fix the system right.
We can't.
It's our problem to provide relief to overseas Americans. Period.
Yeah, and just very, very, thank you very much for that, Solomon. Moving on to the next question, which kind of getting this, double taxation effect of what percentage of American, not a lot. The fair tax options on the table. Mona Lisa's coming back with this, and actually, Mona Lisa, if you want to check out that podcast I did with Jim Bennett, I asked this specific question: Aren't consumption taxes regressive? The fair tax does have an answer to that one. And Geza, I will check out your proposal, your payment tax proposal. Always interested, so you're a smart guy, so I'd love to check that out. Melvin with a great comment, I think echoing what we're trying to do here. Exactly, Melvin. Let's keep focused on limiting double taxation and keep it simple. This will help out the vast majority of expats that have been mostly adversely affected.
Remember, KISS. That's simple. My philosophy.
Yeah,
my principle.
I think you're right. I think we got to really keep it. I will even. Yep, I'll send you a message. Geza on that one. And I think we're coming to the. We've gone. We have a little bit more time. If everyone has more questions, but I think. Jack Deck. Maybe. Do we know how many expats voted this year? By the way, do we have that number?
We won't get the number yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think with that, we might just conclude with Carl's comment here. Carl, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to all. It's here we are. Thank you, Carl. And I'm really glad we did this Q&A because myself, I have to remember to keep it simple, and that of all the problems, the myriad problems with the tax code. And it's not even, I mean, it's not even, it's not necessarily even raising revenue. It's just destroying money that the Federal Reserve creates. The U.S. federal government doesn't even get money from our taxes. Our tax monies, we can't actually protest. If we stop paying taxes, the government's going to do what it's going to do. Just inflation will create. So, I mean, there's so many things, foundationally. So there's a lot going on there. So I'm not sure how much we could do. Oh my God, thank you. And we're getting a lot of Christmas wishes here. Thank you everybody for joining us. Melody, Hunter, thank you so much. All the great questions today. And yeah, I'm hoping we can make this happen. Thank you, Ori. And Geza, you're Geza. I'm just a little bit. Geza's 49 years old. We're going to get this done. And thank you. You bet, Mona Lisa. And let's make this. How about this? Here's our concluding thoughts here. Let's make this.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas to you guys all.
All right. So I would say if you want to continue the discussion, a good place to go is to Twitter. You can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at IRSMedic. And you also can find John there. And I know, Kim, I just realized you were on Twitter, and I didn't have your handle. What is that? So I could share
just
your handle.
At Kim Kettler.
At Kim Kettler. Let me type that in there. Look at this. And I don't know if I put yours. I don't even know if I have your address either, Solomon. So let me just get that up there for people.
Solomon,
it's just Solomon.
Solomon, you.
All right, let me add you in here, right here. At Solomon. There we go. All right, so we got. All right, did I get Kim's up there? All right, so there's Kim's address right there.
Perfect. Thank you.
And here is Solomon's. You can see him there. And here is the great John Richardson as well, expatriation.
Of course.
And myself, you can find me there as well. If you want to DM me on Twitter, knock yourself out. That's a great place to reach me. All right, there's one more comment. That could be, and there it is. Noah, hey, Noah, Merry Christmas to you, Noah. All right, fantastic. All right, thanks everyone for joining.
Bye, guys.
It's been a real honor. Thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you.
discussion.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Okay.